I'm the Book Baron. Welcome in, everybody. So, today, I want to talk about some of my most read authors. That makes sense? No, the authors I've read the most from. Whatever, you get what I'm saying. I wanted to talk about the book that hooked me. What was the first book I ever read for them? What got me hooked on their stuff? How many books I've read from them? What my favorite is. Some of these, it was really hard to pick a favorite, and so I might do kind of like a spin-off of this of some of my favorite authors and my most and least favorite books. So let me know if you want to see that video, because I'm more than happy to put that together. The outline for that video is basically halfway done. I just wanted to talk about some of these authors because I accidentally hit the setting on Storygraph that went from months and years to the all-time stats, and I saw I read 16 books from Sophie Lark. 16! And I realized I just don't really ever talk about her or the Kingmaker series that I'm absolutely obsessed with, but I've got my top 5 most read authors for you. Let's just jump into it, shall we? So first up, we have Sophie Lark. Can you guess what book got me hooked? Indeed, it is Brutal Prince. I was just on my journey to start reading some Mafia. This book was in the process of really blowing up at the time. I'm trying to remember, did I read this one? I read at least part of this series while on a couple of work trips. That was when I was doing a ton of travel for work. These books brought me so much comfort during that time where I was just like never at home. What is Brutal Prince about for anyone who isn't aware? Because I feel like this is such a popular book. So we have our heroine Ada, and she is from the Italian mob. The Irish mafia has made some very lucrative investments, and their oldest son is Callum. But her and her siblings end up sneaking into their party, and in the process, Ada decides that sneaking into this party is just not enough for her. She wants to see the inside of the house. And once she gets in there, she kind of gets caught. She is not going to be able to escape. So she ends up setting fire to a room in order to create a diversion and leave their house. Unfortunately, the heads of each of their families are fed up with this. The rivalry seems to run a lot deeper with the kids than with their parents. And they're like, you know what, we'll shore this up. An arranged marriage. Is this like my most favorite mafia romance of all time? Absolutely not. Ada kind of got on my nerves, but there was something about this balance of the romance, of the scheming, of the gunfights, of all of these different elements of the underground and the legit parts of their lives that I was really just intrigued by. And not only that, I could see what she was setting up for some of the other folks, and I was really excited to get to their stories. So that was my first book of Sophie Lark's that hooked me. I had a super hard time picking which was my favorite. So I love the Kingmaker series, and in particular, I love The Bully and The Spy. The Heir still holds a special place in my heart, but I think if I'm being really honest with myself, my absolute favorite is Heavy Crown, which is the last book in the Brutal Birthright series. This was such a culmination of everything that had been building under the surface, all the alliances that had been made, and all of these storylines kind of had these small pieces that fed into this book. And The Spy does a very similar thing, which is also why that's a favorite from that series. But this one is about Sebastian, who is the youngest son, and I can't remember if he's the youngest or second youngest. And Ada's the youngest? I can't remember, but regardless, he's the youngest of the boys, and he ends up having an injury in Brutal Prince, which causes him to be unable to play basketball. So he's kind of at a loss with where to go with his life, and he's never really taken a huge interest in mob life. However, that ends up changing. He ends up running into Yelena, who is the daughter of the Bratva boss in Chicago, and he's kind of out to get them because they've amassed a lot of power with a lot of these alliances that they've made. Sebastian ends up seeing Yelena being shoved into a trunk, or in some way she's in danger, and he's like, I am a big, tall, white knight here to save you, madam. Little does he know this is actually a setup. There was some very intense moments. There was a light captor-captive element at one point. This had one of the strongest romances out of all the stories that had been in this series, and I just love a man that relentlessly goes after the woman he wants. Even if there's all these obstacles in his way, he's determined. He's gonna get her, and Sebastian is that man. I love Yelena because she's a little bit of a damsel in distress, a little bit of a gal that can handle it by herself. There's something about that combo that makes her just really appealing because she's not totally like wimpy and can't do anything for herself, but she's also not like so stubborn that she can't accept help. I just loved their romance, and their son, oh my God, love their son's cocky attitude. He's the hero in The Heir, and that's why I like that book so much. Also, there's so much action, so much action. There was a moment in this book that had me gasping. I just didn't think it would go that far. All right, guys, the sun came out and I instantly just started pouring sweat. So next up we have, with 11 books, Elizabeth O'Rourke. The first book that hooked me with her was A Deal with the Devil, which is part of her Devil series or Dirty Devil series, something like that. So the heroine in this book kind of needs money. She's attempting to write a book and she has an advance, but not super working out. It's just not coming to her. Her best friend is leaving on a trip and he is an assistant to a world famous plastic surgeon. Oh my god, I don't think I could have picked a worse freeze frame if I tried, but I missed a critical detail that I need to fill you in on, otherwise this makes no sense. Her friend that is going on the trip needs someone to fill in and he hasn't been able to find anybody, and he knows because she is desperate for money that she will step in. The problem is this asshattery that is the man named Hayes, this plastic surgeon guy. Hopefully the rest of this makes more sense, okay, bye. He is an arrogant playboy named Hayes and she does not get along with him. It's only 6 weeks. It's temporary and she really needs some money, so what could go wrong? The reason that I loved this book was because the banter just absolutely got me. The heroine said things that had me laughing out loud, had me rolling. Kevin is licking sweat off of my legs right now. Kevin's my cat if you're new here. Hi, sweetheart. Can you not do that? She also somehow is able to make things feel slow burn in like less than 300 pages. There's no Mariana Zapata length here. I was so impressed with how much tension she was able to build in such a short amount of page length. This was one of those books where I'm like, this third act conflict makes perfect sense to me. It doesn't feel ridiculous or useless or contrived in any way. Like, it felt so real and it drew emotion out of me. I think that was the other thing. I really liked the emotion it pulled, even though it had so much lighthearted banter. This is another one that it was so hard to pick a favorite. I've been emotionally destroyed by the parallel series. That left me, I'm not joking, a little bit catatonic. That was a lot. The other one that I thought about picking was the second book in the Devil series. That's one I reread pretty much every year on my birthday. I absolutely adore it. The banter makes me laugh. There is an almost scene in there that makes me want to chuck the book across the room every time. Such good tension. But I think it has to go to The Summer We Fell because this is the one I think about regularly. The heroine here, she has a really rough home life, so she ends up moving in during high school with her high school boyfriend's very religious family. His dad's a pastor, and she feels like a burden to this family, so she feels like it's her duty or her obligation to please them at every turn, right? She needs to do everything in her power to keep this roof over her head, and so she's running herself ragged. She's working at a restaurant, cooking, cleaning, doing all of these extra things while her boyfriend is just kind of like messing around and surfing during the summer. But the hero, it's not her boyfriend. No, that would be too easy, right? The hero is the friend he brings home from college one summer. Unlike her boyfriend, he absolutely sees through what is happening here. He can really see a lot of himself in her, and he is pushing her to stand up for herself. Her boyfriend's not gonna do it. But that's a past timeline. In the present timeline, they despise each other. She's a famous singer. He's a pro surfer. Suddenly, they're back in town together because her high school boyfriend's mom is building, I can't remember what the house was exactly. I think it was for like unhoused youth. But regardless, it's for a good cause. But they hate each other now. So what happened? First off, can we just talk about how good this cover is? Elizabeth O'Rourke truly picks some of the best man covers I've ever seen in my life. What I love about this is the tension is so good through this entire thing because you can understand why the heroine cannot get with him. She needs to stay with this boyfriend because her very survival, her ability to have a roof over her head, to eat, relies on staying with this boy to be able to live with his family. But she wants so badly to make that choice. She wants it desperately, and so does he. And there's a lot of, I think we can make it work, and then they hit a setback, and now it seems like it's never gonna happen. This book is all tension, to the point that This is one of those books where I'm like, you cut me off too soon. I needed an extended epilogue. I needed to know more about them. I needed more of them like actually together. I was just like so heartbroken. Elizabeth O'Rourke has a way of really like mucking with my feelings with her endings because she really is like, and then they got together. The end. Ma'am, I need a little bit more than that. Okay, now for my sci-fi nerds, technically my third most read author is James S.A. Corey. Everything I've read is from the Expanse series, so we'll move on back to indie romance authors. So next up, with 9 books, we have Elsie Silver. So I've read everything of hers except her latest series. I kind of forgot I was reading Wild Love, and I need to read Wild Eyes yet. That first one was an accidental DNF. I'll get back to that at some point. The first ever book I read was Flawless, of course, the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. So the hero, if you don't know, are you living under a rock? Just out of curiosity. Hero's a bull rider. His name's Rhett, and I can't remember the order of operations, but basically he ends up making a comment about milk where he ends up losing sponsorships, but he's also, if I remember correctly, fighting with other bull riders, and he's known to be a bit of a playboy. His reputation's absolutely in the gutter, and his agent is like, dude, we are losing money. I need you to clean up your act. This is getting out of control. In fact, I'm assigning you a babysitter, a junior agent who also happens to be my daughter, so don't touch her, and you better be on your best darn behavior. With Summer and Rhett constantly being in each other's orbit, they're around each other nearly 24/7, the tension is mounting. How do they resist one another? And they start pushing boundaries. The reason this hooked me is because I went in thinking I would hate this book. I am a yeehaw horse girl all the way. I grew up in a rural area. I've owned multiple horses in my life. Like, I know how to ride Western and English. I was a true horse girl. So I don't like reading books about it because they never get it right, for one, and I hate small towns because the quirky small towns that I see in a lot of these books, I'm like, that's not what it's like. And the thing that I liked about this book was that it's a small town, but it's not over the top quirky. It just happens to be the location. That happens to be where a ranch is located. It happens to be where the story takes place, and you happen to know people in that area who have known you for a long time because it's a small town. I was like, that's what living in a small town is like. Like, no joke, just to give you an example of how small of a town I lived in, I came back from college at one point and went for a run. I had not texted anybody that I was back yet. I was on rural roads, like I'm running out on gravel roads. And someone I didn't know from many grades younger than me texted my best friend and was like, I didn't know she was back in town. What? Anyway, enough about me and my small town trauma. I also loved the family dynamics in this. It was so fun. And once you see the personality of all the people you know are gonna get stories, because you see the little bits of them that you're curious about. So this was really hard because I have so many 5-star books from Elsie Silver once again. I really went back and forth on which to pick because there's a couple from her other series, the Gold Rush Ranch series. Am I having a stroke? What's happening? There are 2 books from the Gold Rush Ranch series, which really hold a special place in my heart. In particular, books 3 and 4. Love them to death, but I think my absolute number 1 has to go to Reckless, which is, I think, the 4th book in the Chestnut Spring series, and it's super connected to the first book. This is about Winter, who is Summer's sister. I know, aren't those names stupid? And the hero is Theo, who is Rhett's protege. So he's also a bull rider. Winter is a doctor and she is pretty buttoned up. She's always kind of lived her life in a very exact way. She's kind of known for being icy. She's actually going through a divorce that's been really brutal. And she's always had a little bit of banter with Theo at these family events that she goes to with Summer. And one time they end up bumping into each other and kind of on a dare, kind of out of a little bit of a desire to let loose, Winter decides she's gonna have a one-night stand with Theo. They're never going to speak about it again, except she gets pregnant. So the reason I love this one is truly because of the hero. I love a hero that is all in. And he doesn't love Winter in spite of her iciness, but because of it, he thinks she's funny and charming and loves her wit. I just love that she's so bitchy to other people and yet softer for him. Was so excited to be a dad and wanted to show all the support and knew how to support her as well, even though she would never ask for it because she's too stubborn. It's total wish fulfillment. Also, the spice on this one was perfectly balanced. I felt like it got a little out of control in the third book where I was like, what is this baby dom business? This makes no sense. This was like the perfect balance of like what Heartless was, where it's like nice and spicy, but not weird and over the top and doesn't make sense for the book. So another author that I've read 9 books from is J.R. Ward, but all of the books are from the same series. So once again, I'm gonna skip this author. They're all from the Black Dagger words. They're all from the Black Dagger Brotherhood. Next up, which was a little bit of a surprise for me with 9 books, is Tate James. I know, I don't really love Why I Choose, and yet she's up here because I binge her series. Her books are like the ones I reach for when I'm like, I should just turn my brain off. But not so fast. Let's talk about the book that got me hooked on her, which was Poison Rose, which she wrote with Jamin Eve. It's the first book in the Boys of Belrose series. This girl is on the run from her mafia ex after witnessing something she absolutely should not have. She then runs away, gets away from him, ends up running into a band, also contains another ex. One of the bandmates has already agreed to kind of like protect her and help her get out of Dodge, but her ex in the band is livid. They ended up on horrible terms, and he writes some really nasty songs about her. So needless to say, the tension in this is very high, especially because his bandmate is very interested. So the reason I really enjoyed this book so much is because, like I said earlier, it's like a popcorn read. I can turn off my brain. I don't have to overthink things. Just over dramatic, completely soapy, polished fanficky feel. It's also action-packed. You can never guess where things are going because it's always going to be a little bit extra. There's no breathing room for moments in this plot. We are powering through to the next crazy, wild idea. Honestly, the writing in this series in particular feels like the 2 authors did like a yes and exercise and just kept everything in. My absolute favorite from Tate James is actually the second book in the series, so I can't really tell you anything about that. What I'll say about the second book is that there had been some building tension that gets a little bit of relief, which was so delicious. We have a little bit of breakthrough, but also there is a moment in this that is just the peak soap opera goodness that made me both laugh out loud and have to know what happened next. All right, next up with 8 books, I have LJ Shen. I don't really read much of her stuff anymore. I've had kind of increasingly mixed luck with her over the years, but she was one of my gateway drugs into dark and taboo romances, let me tell you. And the first book I ever read from her was Vicious. This is about Amelia, and she's like artistic, she's from the working class, and her family in this past timeline works for Vicious's family as like maids, gardeners. So Vicious is a pretty spoiled rich kid. He doesn't have a lot of oversight from family, and he's got a mean streak a mile long because of a little incident that they had when Vicious and Amelia first met. He believes that she knows a very intimate secret about him after he catches her in the house, and he thinks the best way to deal with this is to torment and bully her all throughout high school, making her completely miserable. In the present timeline, they're both living in New York City. Amelia's still really struggling to pay bills. She's from working class. She's trying to support herself and her sister, and she just has the worst luck ever. One day she is waitressing, and who's her client? But Vicious. He ends up making her an offer she cannot refuse. I think there's like 2 really big things about this book in particular that I really liked is that this was like one of the first dark bully romances that I read where the hero's personality doesn't really ever change. He is never really redeemed. Not that he treats like the heroine like crap the whole way through, but his name is Vicious for a reason. He bends just enough to demonstrate that he's into her, but not enough to really have changed his stripes. And I just felt like I had never seen that before. I felt like a lot of times the high school bully would become kind of a big mush after. The other thing that I really like is that Vicious wants to throw money at Amelia, and Amelia doesn't value money. It's very difficult for him to try and purchase things for her because she simply does not care. So he has to engage, bend to the things that she wants, and be invested in the things that she wants in life in order to win her over. And I really loved that because, especially because we have this huge power imbalance with him being so rich and her being so poor and being kind of desperate for money at times. I loved that she was like, still don't care. Still don't care about your money. And I feel like that's where it kind of diverges from a lot of like billionaire romances in that way, where a lot of times they'll kind of like swoop in and like fix all their problems, or at least attempt to. Plus the heroine is a fellow I like to dye my hair fashion colors girl. I can relate. By the way, for anyone who is been subscribed for a while, my fall purple hair is going to be on hold until after my Japan trip because we're already going to look way out of place in Japan. So I didn't want to draw extra attention with my purple hair. That will be coming. It's probably just going to be more like November. Back to what we're here to talk about. Vicious is actually still my favorite book from her. It was the perfect book at the perfect time. And then all of the rest of them just never quite lived up. But one of them got really close. So we're going to say that this one is my favorite. It's quite fitting because it's a second generation series. It's Vicious's and Amelia's kid. So we have Vaughn, and he's kind of tormented Lenora ever since an incident that nearly killed her. It put her on his radar, and he's just kind of glommed onto her ever since. He develops this really unhealthy interest in her. He wants to possess her, but she will not take that lying down. She fights back. This all really comes to a head when they end up in the same art program overseas in London, meaning they're going to be living next to each other, working next to each other, and also they're going to be interning for the same person. But it turns out that's not the only reason Vaughn has chosen this art school. There's other things afoot. He has some revenge to get. Why I liked this one so much? This one, I felt like multiple layers because it starts out kind of like a classic bully romance. In fact, one of the scenes in here reminded me so much of Even If It Hurts. And so initially I was kind of like, ooh, fun, a little bit tropey. And then we get to them at this art school. Oh my goodness. There's some blood play in this. That was wild. As an experienced smut reader, there was some good bits in here. And it somehow also managed to pull emotion out of me. Question mark, question mark. Vicious and Amelia also make appearances. I don't know, it was a mashup of a lot of things I like. High school, dark romance, bully, rival artist, revenge plotline. I mean, truly, what more could I want out of a book? All right, for our final author, we have Sierra Simone with 8 books. My first and favorite still is Saint. This is the 3rd book in the Priest series, I believe. This is about Aiden, who he kind of gives up his billionaire ways very abruptly, and it turns out it's because he needs some extreme measures to help deal with his mental health. So he's decided he's going to give over his life to God and become a monk. But just before he's about to take his final vows, he ends up having another run-in with his ex-boyfriend Elijah, who lets him know that he's actually engaged to be married. In addition to that, they are going to be going together to tour some monasteries in Europe. Elijah is there to learn about the various brewery practices of these monasteries. Aiden is looking for a monastery where he will kind of take his vows and live out the rest of his days. And he has to make a decision. Religion, his mental health, this man he loves, what's actually worth sacrificing, because he can't have it all. This book completely took me by surprise. I picked it up because it was the only book in this series that my library had on audio. I was so unsure going into this book about combining religion and smut, and yet somehow it absolutely works. And there's all these beautiful, poignant lines about mental health, and also the way religion was presented was in a very unique way. There's no homophobia. There was no judgment. The people around him really embraced these mental health issues and dealing with them with medication and therapy. You know, it's Sierra Simone, so it was hot, hot, hot as well. I was just really impressed with the balance she was able to strike. That said, like, if you're super, super religious, I mean, you wouldn't be watching this channel in the first place. I mean, hello. Not the book reviewer for you, but for everybody else, I feel like does a pretty decent job of like striking a balance and being mostly respectful of religion. It's one of those like, I need to go back and reread it and highlight the crap out of it. So because that one is technically my first and my favorite, the only one that even gets close is actually the 2nd book in the series. Yes, I read them out of order. Don't you dare judge me. Also, I have not read the 1st book. No one's critiquing me. Y'all, I know based on the comments, all the same shenanigans I do. The hero of this book is Aiden's, I think it's his older brother. We've got, you know, billionaire playboy, very similar lifestyle to the one Aiden abandoned. He's like trying to keep the family together through some kind of crisis, but for the most part, he's just a godless playboy billionaire type. He ends up falling for his best friend's younger sister because she ends up approaching him before she's supposed to take her vows to become a nun. She has been instructed to live a little, explore life before she decides she really is going to commit to being a nun, because that's all she's ever wanted. She decides that she wants to be taught the spicier things in life. He corrupts her very, very thoroughly. This one definitely doesn't have as much emotion throughout it, but there are still some emotional scenes, and Sarah Simone's writing is really gorgeous in this. It's definitely one that focuses a little bit more on the sexy good time and more the romance side of things. Those are some of my most read authors of all time. I would love to know from you, like, who are your top read authors? What was your favorite book from them? Also, if you've read any books from any of the authors I mentioned, let me know what your favorite book from that author is. Do we have any books that are the same with our first and favorite? I want to hear all the things as usual. I love chatting with you guys. With that, don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Please, please do. It helps me out. It lets the algorithm know you would like to see my face on your homepage more often. And isn't that what everyone wants? And also, don't forget to subscribe for all the same reasons. And I really, really hope I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.